And I'm going to explain some of these hive components, because a lot of people that are new to beekeeping that watch this, I get some comments and they ask questions. So I'm going to show, you know, exactly what this thing is made of. So this hive is called a Langstroth hive, and Langstroth is the name of a monk, I believe, who designed this hive that has all the proper spacing, and they call it bee space. This is the bottom. A lot of people use a solid bottom board. This has a screen, and it has a removable, well, it's supposed to be removable when you don't paint it in there. See how that slides out? In the summertime you take that out. Helps with ventilation, keeps the bees cool. Also, if the bees are cleaning each other off and there's a varroa mite and it falls off, it'll fall down through this screen onto the ground, and the mite can't get back in to lay eggs and repopulate. So varroa mites are one of the big contributors to, a lot of people feel like it's a big contributor to the colony collapse disorder. They carry disease. It's basically if you had a tick the size of a football on your back that was sucking the blood and juices out of your body, that's about how it is for the size of the bee, this varroa mite on them. So they get inside the cells with developing bees, and they suck the juice out of the larva. The larva actually grows and will develop, and the wings will be all crinkled up, and that bee won't be useful. So mites are very destructive, and I treat for mites on my hives at least once a year with various methods, and that's a whole nother video. But since we're coming into winter, I'm putting this cover in here to seal up, and it'll help keep the bees warmer. So that's your bottom entrance component. Some people use these, some don't. It's called a slatted rack. Basically what it does is you put it on the bottom board. It gives the bees more space between where their comb's at and the entrance, so they can gather in here if they need to. A lot of times when it's hot in the summertime, you'll see bees bearded all over the front of your hive, and this helps a little bit of with that. It gives more space for more airflow to flow through your hive. Especially if you put a screen top on it, the air will flow and the bees will stay a lot cooler, and they won't spend a lot of time out on the front fanning and burning up energy that could be converted into honey versus energy spent moving air around. Because these add a little extra space, it also, people feel like they help with reducing swarming. Some people say they don't, some say they do. So that's how beekeepers are. None of them can agree on anything. The next component is the hive body. The hive body is just a rectangular piece of wood. I think it's 9 5/8 inches high. It's the right space for a honeycomb frame to fit in there and fit just right. So this will hold 10. There's also sizes that hold 8, and these ones over here, they call them nukes, they're for 5. But when you have a full-size hive, you want 10s. So this is called a deep super. Some people call it a brood box, because what's in here is usually going to be just your bees. You're not going to want to harvest honey out of here, although some people do. But if this is full of honey, it's going to be, I believe, over 100 pounds. It's like really, really heavy. So that just sits on there. So there you can see how that is. And so there'll be 10 frames that actually line up with those slats stacked in here. And you'll see when I put the bees in here how I load those in there. The next component of a beehive is, a lot of people don't even realize there's two covers. This is the inner cover. So it's just a thin cover with a very thin piece of wood there, 1/8 inch thick. What's important about this is it has this little slot, and some don't, but you need this especially in the winter. That's for ventilation. So the air comes and goes through this slot here, and there's a cover on top of this, and the air will flow out here. Also, if your beehives happen to get flooded and the water comes up from the bottom, the bees can escape and go out there. They won't all drown. It also, in the winter time, bees put off a lot of moisture in their respiration. So the moisture has to have a way to get out, otherwise it'll all condense and drip down on the bees. They get wet and they'll die. There goes an airplane. Okay, so another thing this inner cover does, it gives a sort of a dead air space between this and the top cover. So you know how in the winter time when you have a window, how it gets condensation on it? Well, that's because that window is cold and the air against it is warm. So having this dead air space, your piece of cold hardware will be the next lid that's on top of this. So if there's any condensation forms, it won't be on this inner cover, it'll be on the other cover, and it won't get on the bees that way. So with that said, the next component is the telescoping lid. Okay, this is the top of the hive. This is called the telescoping cover. You can see it has edges that fit and curl and go around and cover that, so rain can't get in. Most commercial beekeepers do not use this type of cover because they can't stack their hives on top of each other. What they usually do is they'll have a pallet, and they will have 8 hives per pallet, 2 stacked on top of each other on 4 locations. You can't do that with this type of lid. Also, it doesn't sit flush, so they can't put those hives right up next to each other. So this is more the small scale hobby beekeeper. It keeps rain out better, but it's not good for like if you have hundreds of hives that you're managing and you're driving them around, moving them on forklifts. So you won't see commercial beekeepers using these. This is more the hobby beekeeper cover. So that's it. That's the components of a hive. As your hive grows, you will add another box. Take this off, put the second box on here, and the bees will move up and it'll become a really large hive. That's called a 2 deep. After that, you put a smaller box that's 6.5 inches on top of that, and that's what you collect your honey in that you harvest. In those 2 deep boxes, you don't ever pull anything out of those. That all belongs to the bees. If you start taking honey out of the hive body where the bees are, you could run into problems where you're starving them out. So don't take the honey from the bees. Okay, that's the end of this little part here. Now I'm going to get started on this tiny swarm. I'm going to move them in here.